Hello, my name is Christopher Renstrom. I'm the creator of rulingplanets.com and Christopher Renstrom Astrology. And today, I want to welcome you to my September 2025 horoscope forecast. On September 1st, Saturn retrogrades back down into the zodiac sign of Pisces. Saturn, the planet of tests, trials, and tribulations, re-enters the zodiac sign of Pisces for a 5.5-month stay. This will reintroduce a dilemma or a predicament that dogged you from March 2023 until May 2025. It may be the same situation, or a situation that closely resembles it. At first, you might feel defeated, like, how can I be going through this again? But this is when it's important to remember that Saturn is a teacher, not a tyrant, a builder, and not a destroyer. History repeats itself only if you don't learn from it. So take this time to review your actions, to draw upon your experience, wisdom, and insight, and you will master a situation that once mastered you. Signs most affected are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. On September 2nd, Mercury enters the zodiac sign of Virgo before squaring Uranus on September 3rd. Virgo is a zodiac sign that prides itself on lining all of its ducks up in a row. And with Mercury entering Virgo on September 2nd, you can be sure that those ducks are going to be color-coded and organized by breed. It's a great way to begin September, being prepared and organized like this, except that Mercury will be forming a square to Uranus on September 3rd. Uranus, as you may recall, is the planet of revolution and change, so that square is certain to ruffle a lot of feathers. However, no sooner does it square Mercury than Uranus will be turning retrograde on September 6th. It's analogous to a boss suddenly walking into your office and telling you that everything on a project has to be changed, and then turning around and leaving for a weeks-long vacation. Obviously, you're going to have to deal with the fallout from this Mercury-Uranus square, but keep those original plans for that project, endeavor, or pitch in your back pocket, because you will either be returning to it in the upcoming weeks or repurposing it in some creative and inventive way. Signs most affected are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. On September 4th, Mars will form a square to Jupiter. They say that possession is 9/10 of the law, and this will prove to be the case when Mars in Libra forms a square to Jupiter in Cancer. Mars in Libra, as you might recall, is all about rules and laws, and the force used to ensure that people obey those rules and laws. Now, the expectation is that people will comply with what they're told to do, but not when Jupiter is in Cancer, the zodiac sign of its exaltation. Jupiter in Cancer literally gives the planet of good fortune and protection the home field advantage in this contest. Not only is it stronger than Mars, which is in detriment in the zodiac sign of Libra, but it's also in the right. So if you're on the Mars side of the square, trying to contest, enforce, or even occupy, this square is not for you. But if you're on the Jupiter side of the square, not only will the sticks and stones fail to break your bones, but you can even get the other party to compensate you for the aggravation. Signs most affected are Aries, Cancer, Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, and Pisces. On September 6th, Uranus turns retrograde in the zodiac sign of Gemini. Uranus retrogrades are famous for pendulum swings. They're not as abrupt in their about-face as a typical Uranus transit, but they can be just as absolute and uncompromising. Now, let's say you've spent months rallying against a cause, refusing to yield an inch on a hotly contested point, or even considering seeing things from a different perspective. Well, When that pendulum swings, like it will on September 6th, you may find yourself waking up on a different side of the brain. You may start to embrace, if not exactly champion, the very things you once found objectionable. But instead of hitting you suddenly like a bolt out of the blue, this realization will gradually dawn on you over the next few months, so that the changes you elect to make are more gradual and long-lasting. Uranus will be retrograde in Gemini until February 3rd, 2026. Signs most affected are Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. On September 7th, there will be a lunar eclipse in the zodiac sign of Pisces. It will feel like your world is unraveling thanks to the lunar eclipse in Pisces. Things tend to fall apart when the full moon disappears from the nighttime sky, and the fact that the eclipse is taking place in Pisces, the last sign of the zodiac, makes it seem all the more apocalyptic. But there's a very simple rule of thumb to lunar eclipses, and it's this: anything that's on weak footing or standing on iffy ground will surely collapse. This pertains to relationships and careers as much as it does to health matters and mental states. It's always unnerving when you discover that something you thought was solid isn't. But the key to surviving this occultation is to get zen about it, because what's ever passing out of your life now actually left a long time ago. This could be worrisome or liberating, depending on your state of mind and how honest you're being with yourself. Whatever the outcome, you need to know that the purpose of the lunar eclipse is to clear away the dead wood in order to make room for new growth. Signs most affected are Gemini, Cancer, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. On September 12th, the Sun in Virgo forms a sextile to Jupiter in Cancer. Sun-Jupiter sextiles are the making something better sextiles in astrology. They're all about building on what you have. It's more creative than ambitious in nature, and it requires some pretty heavy thinking about where you want to go from here. A lot of times, we don't push ourselves unless we have to. I mean, if what's working for you in your life is working for you, then why fix it? Yet what the Sun-Jupiter sextile does is show you the ways that you could grow if you wanted to. Maybe it's by updating your skills, expanding your business, or going back to school to get a better paying job. These are the paths to success that you don't have to take, but you might want to take if your aim is to succeed. Signs most affected are Taurus, Cancer, Leo, Virgo, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, and Pisces. On September 13th, Mercury Cazimi forms a conjunction to the South Node in Virgo. Boy, is that a mouthful. Well, let's break it down like this. First of all, what is Mercury Cazimi? Mercury Cazimi refers to Mercury being exactly conjunct the Sun, all right? An exact conjunction means that they are on the exact same degree. 1 degree before or 1 degree after is not a Cazimi, and indeed the power of Mercury is sort of lessened. But when Mercury is Cazimi the Sun, meaning at the same degree as the Sun, it is said to be in the heart of the Sun. And so what happens to Mercury is that it may feel diminished as it approaches the Sun, but suddenly, when it stands at the heart of the Sun, it becomes resplendent, it becomes glorious, it becomes brilliant in all of the properties and aptitudes of Mercury. When we combine the fact that not only do we have Mercury Cazimi in Virgo on September 13th, but that Mercury is exalted in the zodiac sign of Virgo. That means it's at its most brilliant, it's at its most resourceful. However, we have to also remember that this Cazimi is conjunct the South Node in astrology. And the South Node in astrology is basically where you've been in life. the north node is always pointing to where you want to go, whereas the south node is pointing to where you've been. It's kind of the been there, done that node in astrology. And in evolutionary astrology, the south node will often refer to past lives. In the way that I would read it, well, I'm going to sort of have a funny take on it. All right, I'm sorry, but this Mercury Cazimi conjunct the South Node reminds me a lot of Karen Black in the movie Airport 1975. Now, I don't know if you remember that movie, or I don't know if you've even seen it, but it's a wonderful movie, and you should really, really watch it because it's hysterically funny, but it also has some very good lessons to learn. Lessons having to do with a Cazimi Mercury conjunct the South Node in the zodiac sign of Virgo. Now, the way that I see it, whenever a planet is conjunct a South Node, it's kind of like that moment in Airport 75 where there are passengers who are on a passenger jet. It's a transcontinental flight. They're flying from the East Coast to the West Coast, and they're minding their own business, and they're maybe even sleeping or resting on the flight, and then suddenly there's this small plane where the pilot of the small plane has a heart attack, and the small plane goes right into the Boeing 747. Okay, this is made in 1975. So the small plane goes into the Boeing 747 and smashes against it, and it rips a hole in the cockpit. And I think the co-pilot goes flying out through this hole in the cockpit. And there's a navigator, and he's like blinded in the wreckage. And there's Karen Black, who had just served coffee to them. She's a stewardess. There's Karen Black, and she's just served coffee to them, and she feels the jolt, and everyone in the airplane feels the jolt as the plane careens from side to side. And Karen Black turns around, and she's like, "We've got to help the pilots." And there's like, I don't know, Shirley or something like that. She's got a little neckerchief tied around her neck, and she's like, "Yes." And so they go and they force open the door, and there's wind that's blowing because it's decompressed and the plane has lowered, and there's wind that's blowing, and Karen Black is calling out, and she's like, "Is anyone there? Is anyone there?" And the navigator is like, "Oh, I'm here." And she's like, "What happened?" As if like we had to guess. Okay, there's been like a crash, and there's a huge gaping hole in the cockpit of the 747. And he's like, "There's been a disaster," or something like that, "and I have blood in my eyes and I can't see." And she's like, "What are we gonna do?" And he's like, "We have to pilot the plane." And she's like, "Pilot the plane?" And she turns to Shirley, who's like, "Pilot the plane?" And Karen Black's like, "I'm just a stewardess." Okay, so it's like so fabulous. And everyone in the plane is like, oh, they're panicking and things like that. And I think like there's different passengers, like there's a guitar playing nun, I think, and there's a Linda Blair, fresh from The Exorcist, who's getting a liver transplant or something like that, and she's connected to. And so the lives of the whole plane are on Karen Black, and Karen Black just has to sort of like get it together here. Okay, so what she does is that she switches into quick thinking mode. Okay, which is very Mercury and Virgo, and she looks around for the radio, and she hears someone like, "Flight 7417, are you all right?" And she's like, "Hello, hello." And they're like, "Is this flight 7417? Yes, but the pilot's gone and the co-pilot's gone. There's been a crash, and we have only a navigator, but he's blind and he can't see, and it's only me, and I'm only a stewardess." And so they're like, "Well, we're going to give you directions of how to fly this plane." And she's like, "Fly this plane." You can tell how much I love this movie when I was a teenager watching it. Okay. And she's like, it's like wind is blowing and things like this. And so they give her directions on how to fly the plane. And that's kind of like the image that I want you to think of with Mercury Cazimi conjunct the South Node in Virgo. All of this energy is going out of your life. It's like the little plane that hit the big 747, and it's decompressed, and all of this energy and air goes flying out of your life, but you're responsible for the other things in your life. They may be priorities or responsibilities or people who are relying on you. You have to fly the plane. And so Karen Black, she's like, "Well, what do I do? What do I do?" And so the people are like, "Well, Karen Black, we're going to walk you through every one of these steps. And, first take a breath and relax," which just she's flying a plane. But anyway, she takes a breath and she relaxes, and she looks at the different measurements and things like this, and she flies the plane. She actually flies the plane quite successfully. And she's doing okay, and she's feeling good about it. And Shirley's like, good thing. And I'll see to the passengers and serve them whatever we have, coffee and tea and biscotti cookies. And Karen Black's like, you do that. But then suddenly Karen Black sees looming, in front of them in the darkness is the Rocky Mountains. I mean, the plane has lost altitude and it's heading right towards the Rocky Mountains. And she sees this and she reports this, and they're like, that's not good. And she's like, it's not good. And so they give her direction, and she calms herself down, and she successfully pilots the plane up and over the Rocky Mountains in the last minute. And so what this is talking about is Mercury and Virgo's ability to both follow direction and improvise and be spontaneous all at the same time. I mean, these people can't see what Karen Black is dealing with, and the navigator is of some help, but it's all on her shoulders. And so it's about clearing out the anxiety and the nervousness, clearing out the fact that she's only a stewardess, not worrying about whether the passengers are getting their coffee and tea and biscotti cookies, and just really focusing on this flight. And she does it, so again, it's kind of like getting rid of the anxiety, dispelling the anxiety, assessing a situation. A lot of things have been lost. One has been hit by something, and the South Node can be an unraveling energy. And so it can be a panic of like, all of this stuff is unraveling in my life and I have to reach and grab for things. But where Mercury is going with this is getting you to focus on getting through the situation, the unraveling situation, the challenging situation that you're going through, to put aside the panic, put aside the anxiety, and focus on the task at hand, and to listen, to call upon resources other than you. Karen Black is learning how to fly a plane from people in a tower, okay? And so this is what's going on. And so she's opening up her mind, she's figuring out the things on the console, and she's figuring out how to do this. And this is basically what the Mercury Cazimi is about. Not only is it the necessity of having to get yourself through what might be a very difficult or challenging time, but it's also trusting in your spontaneity, trusting in your own resources to figure it out, but also asking for help, getting counsel, advice, guidance, and support from the people around you, from people who are on hand. So in other words, you're not in this alone. You do have people who can help you navigate, but you have to have the focus and the determination to navigate this. And if you can do this during this Mercury Cazimi conjunct South Node experience, then you will definitely wind up bringing the plane in for a safe landing. Signs most affected are Taurus, Gemini, Virgo, and Capricorn. On September 14th, there will be a last quarter moon in the zodiac sign of Gemini. Following right on the heels of this Mercury Cazimi conjunct the South Node in Virgo is a last quarter moon in Gemini. And you might have noticed from what I just described that both Virgo and Gemini are ruled by Mercury. And Mercury is in the sort of pivot point of this last quarter moon. So there's a lot of thinking on your feet. There's a lot of having to assess a situation very quickly. And there's a lot of living in the moment and doing whatever it takes to solve a problem or get you through a bit of a bad patch. Now, last quarter moons are that part of the lunar cycle when the moon is waning. It's losing its light as it heads towards a new moon, okay? But before it gets to the new moon, it's winding up its time here in its lunar cycle. You might be faced with a situation here in which you don't mean to mislead someone or perhaps other people in your life, but it may be better for them to believe continuing in a false impression that they have of what's going on than for you to divulge everything right now. if I can return back to Karen Black in the cockpit, it's better for the passengers to believe that everything's okay and that they're in good hands and that they're going to be brought in for a safe landing than to actually have a view of what this cockpit of the 747 looks like. Okay, so there's something to be said about letting people believe the things that they need to believe because you're going through a very difficult time. Now, this isn't really quite a lie or a deception, as it is just necessity. If people need to believe that they're in okay hands or things are all right, and if that's what's going to get you through a rough passage on the other side of what is a very difficult situation, then let them do that. You don't have to lie to them, but you don't have to correct their false assumptions either. This is something that people born under the planet Mercury know how to do quite discreetly, delicately, and effectively. So it might be a little bit more clumsy if you're not born under Gemini or Virgo, but you might as well give it a try during this last quarter moon because you're definitely going to be thankful that these were the decisions that you made. The signs most affected are Gemini, Cancer, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. On September 15th, Venus forms a sextile to Mars. Venus-Mars sextiles are the let's team up sextiles in astrology. Whatever the tensions that exist between you and another person, maybe these tensions are sexual, professional, cultural, or even spiritual. This sextile shows you putting aside your differences and working together. Books and films are full of unlikely partners who wind up solving a crime together, beating the odds, surviving an ordeal, or saving the day, despite and because of their combined best efforts. Now, you could get together in the end, or wind up going your separate ways, but what's indisputable is the magic touch that only the two of you can bring. Signs most affected are Aries, Gemini, Leo, Libra, Sagittarius, and Aquarius. On September 17th, Mercury will be opposite Saturn. What you see isn't going to be what you get when Mercury forms an opposition to retrograde Saturn in the sky. So put off signing papers or finalizing any agreements for now. Now, this won't be easy because time is short and that window of opportunity is closing. But this might be something that the other party wants you to believe. Why? Because it looks like they're under pressure to seal the deal, that they need to get out of Dodge fast, or are being manipulated by some behind-the-scenes third party who's yet to make their presence known. In any case, this isn't the time to proceed. Not until you've learned everything that there is to know. Signs most affected are Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. On September 18th, Mercury enters the zodiac sign of Libra and then opposes Neptune. Bullies are only as big as the concessions you make to them. It's something to keep in mind when Mercury, planet of the mind, enters Libra on September 18th. It may feel like you're courting disaster when you refuse to bend the knee to someone who has the power to make your life miserable. Obviously, nobody likes to feel intimidated, and it's human nature to give a bully what they want with the expectation that they'll stop making your life miserable. But Neptune in Aries shows that this person is all bluster. Now, this doesn't mean you have to lock horns with this person. Remember that this is an opposition we're talking about and not a square. There's a difference between a standoff and a fight. So what you want to do in the face of the demands that are being made of you is to stay in your corner and refuse to budge. Not only does your opponent not have the power to make you change your position, but you're safe as long as you stay on your side of the dividing line. Signs most affected are Aries, Gemini, Leo, Libra, Sagittarius, and Aquarius. On September 19th, Mercury forms a trine to Uranus and Pluto. This is a propitious day because this Mercury trine to Uranus and Pluto creates a grand trine in the sky above. Mercury is currently in the zodiac sign of Libra. It will be forming a trine to Uranus, which is in Gemini, and Pluto, which is in Aquarius. So essentially what we have are 3 points of an air triangle, 3 points of an air trinity. Grand trines are wonderful in astrology because grand trines not only bring good fortune, they also bring protection. The idea being that if you are fortunate in a matter, it's because you need protection. Protection to guard against your fortune being taken away. In this case, with a grand trine in air, where are you fortunate in your life? Air signs rule over relationships. These are the people that you know. Air signs, that's Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, the greatest resource for an air sign are their human resources, the people that they know, the people that they can contact, the people that they can consult with, the people who will guide them out of a situation where they might feel like their back is up against the wall. If you have a grand trine in air in your own horoscope, that's one planet in each of the air signs, what that can also talk about is a period of time in your life in which you felt like you were surrounded by people who didn't get you. You felt like you were surrounded by people who didn't really understand you, yet you always carried within you this grand trine, this protective field that one day you would meet people who would understand you. One day you would meet people who would get where you're coming from. So that grand trine in air kind of protects that idea. If you have a grand trine in air, you never lose faith in the idea that one day you will meet your tribe. You will meet people who understand you and get you. And that is something that a grand trine in air will hold for you. It's almost like it's holding space for you until that can come into your life. When this occurs by transit, the big message of a grand trine in air is you are not alone, okay? With whatever you're facing that might be a difficulty or a challenge, you are not alone. There are people you can turn to. There are people that you can rely on. There are people who are here to help or here to give you advice and guidance. So during this period of time, you don't want to isolate. You actually want to do the opposite. You want to text someone. You want to research an agency that might be of help. You want to see if there are any resources you can contact who can help you get from here to there. Not only is this the proper time to do it, the advantageous time to do it, it's a period of time when you can expect to receive results and very quick results. So as long as you don't isolate or withdraw or remove yourself from a situation, as long as you turn to other people, these can be people you've known for a long time. These can be people in professional capacities that you've been connected to. This could even be a passing acquaintance. But as long as you turn to people, they will be able to help you through this period of time. And moreover, air rules over the idea of rules and laws. So this is a period of time in which the rules and laws are going to work in your favor. They will protect your interests, they will provide shelter from the storm, and they will even give you an unthought of advantage, an advantage that you didn't even think of. But once it becomes clear, you're like, oh, I can see how I can work this now. And it will give you a definite advantage in whatever situation or difficulty you're facing. Signs most affected are Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. Another celestial event taking place on September 19th is Venus entering the zodiac sign of Virgo. Venus, the planet of love and beauty, enters the zodiac sign of Virgo for a 3.5-week stay. Venus always pumps up the powers of attraction of whatever zodiac sign it happens to be transiting through. So you can expect lots of invites, offers, and introductions. Yet Venus has a hard time in Virgo. Because where most zodiac signs would revel in the attention that Venus brings, Venus in Virgo knows that opportunities come with strings attached, and she doesn't want to be made to feel beholden to anyone. Thankfully, a Virgo Venus is a shrewd Venus. It comes from centuries of being cast as the virtuous maiden in the fairy tale. Venus Virgos know better than to accept gifts from little old ladies bearing apples, spindles that mysteriously show up on your 16th birthday, or roses picked from gardens that belong to beastly owners. A Venus Virgo knows that if you examine all entreaties thoroughly, you will eventually be able to separate the wheat from the chaff, and that there's nothing wrong with being specific and discriminating, especially in this day and age. Venus will be in the zodiac sign of Virgo until October 13th. Signs most affected are Taurus, Virgo, Libra, and Capricorn. On September 21st, there will be a solar eclipse in Virgo. How's your health and wealth? That's what you'll be wondering when there's a solar eclipse in the zodiac sign of Virgo. Solar eclipses tend to bring you back down to Earth when they occur in Earth signs. And what makes Virgo different from the other two Earth signs, Taurus and Capricorn, is its emphasis on the body. Have you been neglecting yours lately? Treating it like a pup tent instead of the glorious temple that it is? You need to listen to the signals you're getting now. This could require a change in diet, more downtime, meditation to relieve stress, or a more reasonable exercise regimen. You can't keep burning the candle at both ends. You're a human being, not a machine, and you're beginning to show signs of wear and tear. And now that we've talked about health, what about wealth? If you feel like you're stretched too thin financially, or like you are living beyond your means, then this is the time to cut back and to consolidate. Eclipses can be like cosmic seismic vibrations, alerting us to earthquakes ahead of time. Act in a timely manner, and you'll successfully avoid any shortfalls. And remember that it's always better to be the ant than the grasshopper. Signs most affected are Gemini, Cancer, Leo, and Virgo. On September 22nd, Mars enters the zodiac sign of Scorpio. Hopefully, you've kept your nose clean, done well by the people in your life, and don't have any compromising videos of yourself circulating on TikTok, courtesy of Coldplay. If you've played by the rules, then you have nothing to worry about during this period of time that Mars is traveling through the realm of Pluto. However, if you've betrayed lovers, cheated business partners, or turned friends into enemies, then you will need to watch your back. Misdeeds can be like blood in the water now, drawing out the sharks. And that's because Scorpio is an extremely vengeful sign. It has a long memory, it never forgives, and it never forgets. If you want to avoid paying out an eye for an eye, then schedule a heart-to-heart with those you've maligned before it's too late. Mars will be in Scorpio from September 22nd until November 4th. Signs most affected are Aries, Taurus, Cancer, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. On September 24th, Mars forms a square to Pluto. Squares between planets are typically combative aspects in astrology. One planet wants to do things one way, and the other planet wants to do things another. And it's an arm wrestle from then on. Mars in Scorpio is heated and emotional, and oftentimes it has a right to be. This is more an outraged Mars than an outrageous one, which means that it's been hurt or trespassed against, and it wants compensation for it. Pluto in Aquarius often symbolizes a group of people, so it could represent an agency or an organization. What this square shows is one party demanding to be seen and heard, while the other party produces a lot of paperwork that needs to be filled out first. It's understandably frustrating. However, it's important that if you're the person who's been done wrong, that you follow through with your case. It may seem like nobody's listening, that you're up against something larger and labyrinthine. But Mars, in the zodiac sign of Scorpio, rules the square. Pluto may be the co-ruler of Scorpio, but Pluto is in Aquarius, which means that it has to bend the knee to Mars in Scorpio, because Mars is in the zodiac sign that it rules. So don't give up and don't give in, and you will prevail in the end. Signs most affected are Aries, Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. On September 29th, there will be a first quarter moon in Capricorn. Business is business, which means nobody can fault you for severing ties with those who failed to keep their part of the bargain. Nor should you think twice about switching from an underperforming client to one whose star is on the rise. This is the first quarter moon Capricorn at its objective best. Nevertheless, there's still a way of doing this gracefully and with class. It's always best to be proactive in situations like these, so take the time to meet with the people you are saying goodbye to so that you can tell them this news in person. They won't be happy about your association coming to an end, but they'll appreciate the respect and professionalism you exhibited. And who knows? Maybe one day your paths will cross again. Signs most affected are Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. If you enjoyed what you saw, please press the like button. It helps more than you know. If you could subscribe, that would be wonderful. I've had such a wonderful time visiting with you this week, and I can't wait to get together next time on Christopher Renstrom Astrology.